And we are live.
They've won Tonys and Oscars and Emmys and Grammys. There's no red carpet because they're home in their jammies. From Melrose Place to Broadway to Janeway and her crew. Let Seth and James bring all the stars to you.
Anywho,
they're entertaining everyone, so who's gonna grouse? Just sit right back and you'll hear some tales on Stars in the House.
Still got it. Hi, everyone. I'm Seth Rudetsky, and this is Kenny Leon.
Hello, Kenny Leon.
It's not Leon.
Leon.
But it should be L-E'-aigu.
No. I'm a country boy from Tallahassee, Florida.
I take it back. We're here discussing the NAA. First of all, we're here at Stars in the House. Kenny, turns out, did it 1,000 years ago when we first began with Black Theater United. But now we're here to discuss the NAA. Kenny, are you allowed to tell everybody why you're in town, or is everything a big hush-hush secret?
No. I'm in town. I'm doing a new play with Tom Hanks that we're doing at the Shed, starting rehearsal in September. So I'm just finishing up casting for that. And, it's just been a pleasure to begin work with the great Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were saying that there's kind of a Jewishy piano player role or something.
we'll create that. Yeah.
I just want to clarify. Okay, so we're here to discuss the not the NRA, the NEA. And we're gonna have Cara Joy David, who wrote a brilliant article about the cutting of funding, and we're gonna have Tim Daly, who runs this organization, Creative Coalition, which is about NEA funding, and then I did an interview with Moisés Kaufman, talking about it too. So, Kenny, I want to just spend a couple minutes telling my audience what did the NEA, what did they ever do for you? But seriously, what did the NEA ever do for you?
Oh, come on, man. My whole professional life, I ran a theater in Atlanta, the Alliance Theater Company. I created another theater, True Colors Theater Company. I'm on the board of the Public Theater. I'm sort of on the staff sometimes at the Roundabout Theater. The National Endowment for the Arts have played a big part in what we do, in the creation of what we do. And I've always believed that education was tied to community, which was tied to regional theater, which was tied to commercial theater, which is all tied to how do we get the best out of our artistic minds. And so it's not how much the money the National Endowment gives, it's like the idea that we have a National Endowment for the Arts. In fact, I would think that the money is small. They need to give more money. I would increase the National Endowment for the Arts. But it allows artists to tackle scary topics, to talk about things that the commercial world wouldn't allow. I mean, think about the things that won Tony Awards this year. Purpose was developed at Steppenwolf Theater. They could take chances there. The guy who won the Pulitzer, he's been allowed to take chances because of the grants afforded by the National Endowment for the Arts. Maybe Happy Ending at the Alliance Theater. So I just think that the NEA is about freedom of speech, freedom of creativity. And without that, there is no commercialization.
But what about the people that say, oh, the NEA is funding, woke theater, and it's just for liberal theater, and it's unfair?
That's bullshit.
Thank you. Why?
It's because the funding is in all 50 states. It's in red states. It's in small towns. It's in Iowa. It's in my hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida. It's for all people, all regions. It's all creativity. If you get rid of that, my God, I would hate to see what the country looks like. But yeah, it's not for whatever,
Okay, I just want to give the devil's advocate. So when you were working at all these regional theaters, you would rely on NEA grants, but you were saying not necessarily to fund your whole season, because in Cara's article, some people were saying, what's $15,000 anyway? What does it matter if it's a little amount of money? Why not just replace it with somebody else?
Because it leverages you to get funding from other people or organization. It says that we're legitimate. When the regional theater movement began, it began to get away from the commercialization of theater.
Why do they want to get away from that?
Because, you know, when you're on Broadway, I should know, if you're on Broadway, it's like, okay, what can we sell? What can we sell in this window of time? How many people can we get to it in 3 months? And if we don't get enough people there in 3 months, it's gonna close. And when you're creating something, it allows you over time to create, to build, to have an audience that sustains it. It also says to a corporation that this is legitimate. This is in the 50, and getting away from the commercialization allows you to ask questions in your work. So instead of it being because, oh, this will make X amount of dollars, or we guess it will make X amount of dollars, we can say, what do we want to ask ourselves in this community? And if the community is not important to the country, but just to the region, it's like, you know, in this city, in Tampa, Florida, we have a problem with sewage. We want to explore a play that deals with that. You know, and Kentucky has different problems than California. So every region can go to the specifics of that community and ask its own community the questions, and you can develop art around that. You can have community discussions about that in that community. And not every play is headed to Broadway, but I think every community is about artistic curiosity. It's about humanity's struggle with itself over time. It's about how do we impact each other's lives and make our lives better. It's about how do we get the evil out of our communities. It's just a powerful tool of discovery of self and community.
Basically, it's very pro-American, the NEA, because it's sponsoring these communities all over the country. It's the opposite of saying it's like liberal elite. It's more for America.
It's all about diversity of thinking. It's all, and if you go to Atlanta, Georgia, it's not about being woke. You have all kinds of theaters in Atlanta, Georgia. You go to Chicago, you have, 100 or more theaters, all different from each other, and all basically getting pennies. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's $1,000 here, $50 here. So it's not about financial exploitation. To me, it's what do you call it? It's without the NEA, you're fighting First Amendment rights. You're like, you don't have the right to explore your own thinking. And I just think that, look at the shows coming in from the UK. Coming in from the UK, they get government support.
Right, they get government funding.
You know what I mean? So it's like, so we're at a disadvantage even that way when we don't have that kind of support.
Great comment. Any agent for theaters, all culture. I agree. It is all culture. It's not just, and Kenny, it's not like you're Mr. Nonprofit. You're both. You're nonprofit theater, but tell everybody who was in your recent Broadway show. You had an up and comer.
And which Broadway show?
Didn't you just do some Shakespeare show?
Oh yeah. With Othello. Yeah. Sometimes, oh man,
who's
you're gonna get me upset. Denzel Washington.
Okay, so yeah,
and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, that's my point.
But sometimes people think, oh well, that show had those 2 stars. Yeah, but those two stars have a foundation in the American theater. Yeah. Denzel studied theater.
Yeah. They weren't models who just became.
They study theater. Denzel comes to Broadway every 7 years. You know what I mean? And it's because he is a theater actor who does film work. That's basically who he is. And then, but look at the rest of that cast. Those are just 2 actors. That's a cast of 20. So you got 18 other people in the show. You have, 10 people getting their Broadway debut, who some of them just graduated from theater school, so they're in there. They're getting the experience of working with those actors, but they're also getting paid and trying to earn a livelihood, and sometimes we're our worst enemy. We let people say, oh, well, how much is it worth to support our art? We don't have a problem in other industries like, oh, I'm going to pay whatever to
the see, Super Bowl. My trainer, the Super Bowl tickets. Don't get me started on that crap. But my point is, you work with huge stars and you do nonprofit. So it's not just about like you're this because it's all connected.
I've been I ran the Alliance Theater, a nonprofit theater in Atlanta, Georgia, for 10 years. I left the theater and then started something called True Colors Theater Company, which was a culturally specific theater that had a smaller budget. Alliance Theater's annual budget to do 11 shows was, maybe 15 million, 20 million. But the True Colors budget was 2 million.
For the whole season?
For the whole season, 2 million. So I ran that theater company. I've worked at regional theaters all across the country. I've worked in small theaters. I developed projects with the homeless population because I did something called People of the Brick. But because of the National Endowment for the Arts, I was able to use that little seed of financial assistance to go out and recruit homeless people, to teach them acting skills, to put them on stage, and then to pay them and give them an opportunity to sort of maybe, start to begin to figure out their life.
Feel human.
So that's just one example. I've done things because of National Endowment for the Arts. I've done prison reform. I've been in prisons and using acting as a tool to help them understand, their lives and their situation. So it's helped in so many ways all across the country, but given what the community is in need of.
So if you can stay, I just want to bring on Kara and Tim to talk about this. So first I'm going to bring on Kara for the beginning. Hi, Kara Joy David.
Hey.
First, what's with the middle name? Are you in equity and there was another Kara David? Let's discuss. So.
No, I always wrote with my middle name. So people in the industry started calling me Kara Joy. So now I have to keep it.
Okay, just want to make sure. So, Kara, my husband, James, who, by the way, is not here. We haven't split up. He's on this fabulous cruise right now. People are watching like, where's James? But he read your amazing article and he's like, you have to have her on. What made you decide to do this massive research on the NEA and how the cuts are affecting everything?
So I have always cared deeply about nonprofit regional theaters. And as you know, for the last few years, we've been in this major crisis period.
Even during the last administration.
Yeah, before the pandemic, subscriptions were falling off, nonprofits. Yeah. And then when COVID happened, we really went into a whole nother world, right? And we still haven't come out of that. We haven't come out of it on Broadway necessarily, but we certainly haven't come out of it in our regionals, in our nonprofits. And unfortunately, they were being floated money throughout the pandemic, which was great. That kept them alive. But then when we got out of the pandemic, regionals were suffering and nonprofits were suffering. And that has always been super sad to me. I'm always going around the country. I try to go to 6 new regional nonprofits a year. And I'm always going around the country because that's our feeder, right? That's 2 things for us. All of those theaters and all of that part of our community, first of all, they're raising better people, right? Better people are people who go to see arts and culture, et cetera, who experience the arts. But they're also raising the next generation of theater goers, right? They're raising people who want to come to New York and see theaters.
How did you discover theater? Because you said you grew up poor in Florida. How did you first see theater?
Oh man, I went to a historically Black college in Atlanta, Georgia.
It wasn't until then?
Yeah. But when I went to school in Sarasota, Florida, they would take the poor kids along with all the kids, and we would go to the Oslo Theater and we could experience plays. And I could only do that through the school system. My mom didn't have financial support to do that. I was like, what are you talking about? But because I was in school, because there was support of it, they would have field trips so we can go and see Shakespeare. And then I was in a program called Upward Bound. Upward Bound was a program that helped low-income families, sort of catch up. History, we can be in denial about that as long as we want. History is history. Slavery did happen. Denial of education did happen. Denial to even find your own spiritual pursuit, that did happen. So, those programs worked for us to catch up. So me and Angela Bassett both were in a program called, we grew up in the same hometown. We were in a program called Upward Bound, and we had to go to school from 9th grade on. Every weekend we would be on a college campus, and every summer we would accelerate our educational pursuits. And because of that assistance, because of the small financial assistance to that, I was able to attend college. Angela Bassett was able to attend college. And I would say, arguably, some people might want to argue, but we are both giving back. We are both productive citizens. And my mother, who was a single parent, and her mother were sharecroppers. Their mother were slaves. Her mother was slaves. That's reality. That happened. We are a better country when we reach out to all communities and create an equal playing field for everybody. And I think the National Endowment, that's what it does. It creates a national equal playing field for everybody, no matter what you think. And it's not about people getting to Broadway. It's about, using art to understand yourselves better, understand community better, becoming better citizens, becoming a better mayor, a better teacher, a better fireman. It's just good for us. And I just think that we're fucking with the wrong thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I agree with the language.
And after the pandemic, we saw state budgets being cut for the arts. And what really theaters have done is they've stepped up and filled that void. Even as they're suffering, there are more theaters going into schools than ever before because states aren't funding it. And theaters need funding for that. And so when the grant in May, when everyone, what we call Black Friday or the Friday Night Massacre, or whatever you want to call it, when the majority of organizations that were getting that NEA funding got letters or emails that said, we no longer have grant money, then a bunch of people, artistic directors, called me and, emailed me because I have such a wealth of knowledge on the regional circuit. And they said, we really need to do something. We really need to bring this to light as much as possible. So I went and I researched because I thought, listen, local media, which has done a crappy job of covering theater, is doing a really good job of covering this, actually. Like they stepped up, thankfully, and they rose the profile. And American Theater Magazine did some stories, but we have, and that's my story in American Theater Magazine, which they co-ran from Broadway World. But we need more people to hear about it and more people to understand it. And so I think I wanted to do it because of my readership is both New York industry and countrywide, nationwide. And so I thought it would raise the profile of this. And that's what it is all about to me, because we need these organizations, as Kenny said, right? It is creating better people, right? And also the arts are an economic driver. We don't talk enough about how in every single state, you invest, $2 million in Alabama, they're getting that back tenfold.
With restaurant, well, here's someone who can help us save the arts because he's sort of the resident big mouth. So I'm going to bring him on also. So Tim Daly, you're coming on. So Tim, you're actually doing, now, first of all, is that a green screen or are you just living in a beautiful cabin?
No, I'm in Vermont, and Vermont it's hard to find a place that's too ugly in Vermont. So I've had a farm here for a long time, and I'm getting away from it all.
So, me, Kenny, Kara, we're all saying we have to do something. Tim Daly, can you tell us what the F we can do?
Well, I think keep doing this, keep talking about it. I mean, I'm going to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday to meet with some senators because having been with the Creative Coalition for a long time, we have some allies there who, and we have been instrumental in saving or increasing slightly the National Endowment for the Arts many, many times. The problem now is that even the people who are allies are scared because they feel like if they say the wrong thing or make the wrong move, they're going to get primaried or lose their job, whatever. But I am going to implore the people who I know rely on the arts, rely on the NEA to support theaters and other artistic pursuits in their communities. And I also just want to say that, everything that Kenny and Kara Joy have said is exactly right. For me, there are three things. There's the things about art that's amazing is that there's an intellectual part, there's an emotional part, and there's a spiritual part, and there's a financial part. When I first joined the Creative Coalition, I was reading a lot about arts education, and I read something that a study that was done that when children have a full curriculum in the arts, they're 3 times more likely to graduate from high school. I read that and I thought, I'm done. I'll go to DC and I'll tell some senators this, and boom, arts is going to be back in our schools, and the NEA is going to be tripled in its funding. But for some reason, people are afraid of the word arts. And I can almost see their thought bubble. They either see, hippies in the woods wearing tights and smoking pot. Nothing wrong with that, but that, or they see fancy people, in tuxedos at Carnegie Hall. And the truth is that what part of my mission is to change the narrative about arts in this country. Because when I say to people, "Are you an artist?" they're more likely than not to say like, "Oh, absolutely not. I suck. I don't do anything." But if I say, "Do you sing in your church choir? Do you play bongos in your basement? Do you sew your kids' costumes for school plays?" They're like, "Yeah." So my point is, you are an artist. You're just not a professional artist. And the thing is that being exposed to and participating in the arts, as everyone has said, is vital to creating whole human beings. The other financial part is that every dollar spent by the NEA, by the government and the NEA, generates about $9 in return in economic activity. So if this is a transactional problem, the NEA is a moneymaker. And communities that have I have been talking a lot to a Republican senator named Mike Simpson in Idaho, and he's like, "Do not take my Idaho Shakespeare Festival. That's a big money maker for us. There's a lot of tourism, the restaurants, the hotels."
Oh, bye-bye, Tim Daly.
Tim, what I wanted to hear from Tim is like, how much is the actual percentage of the federal budget coming from the NEA, comparatively to every other department?
Kara, do you know?
It's 0.003%.
Right.
That's outrageously expensive. I just want to interrupt for 1 second. It's what Tim is saying, and what I think is important, where we can help and where specifically gay people can help, is sort of mocking theater for being gay. And I think that's a big reason. There's Tim. I think it's a big reason, by the way, why people are sort of anti the arts. Like, a lot of people are like, the Tonys is gay Christmas, or like, of course, like musical theater, you're gay. And I always go, Ed Sullivan was like a white conservative Republican who loved theater. Like, theater is not gay. The arts are for everyone. And the more you make it like it's this gay, fun thing.
Are you gay?
Yeah. That's the point, though. It becomes like this separation. Like, you like theater if you're gay, but if you're straight, you don't. And like, Kenny, you're straight. Tim, you're straight. And I hate that it's become this gay thing. It doesn't have to be gay. It's for everybody.
Here's the thing. Here is the analogy that I've come up with for the arts. The arts are there's four things that I believe. One is, I believe art is the opposite of war. War is destructive. Art is creative.
Right.
Two, art is like air. We're not aware of every breath we take, but if we wake up and are present, it surrounds us and it quietly sustains us. Three, art is like love, impossible to define, but every human being needs love. We know that. And four, and maybe most importantly, art is like food. We're not going to like everything we taste. Some of it we're going to think is gross. Some of it we're going to think is absolutely delectable, but we can't live without it. So let's kind of wake up to the fact that art is everywhere. I would challenge anyone who's listening here, or anyone, in this country, to tell me that they didn't listen to music today, that they didn't walk past a mural or a painting or street art. It is what makes us unique as a species. And we have got to start supporting it. I mean, a tiny country like England spends $1.6 billion on their arts budget. We, a country 5 times that big, spend 207,000. It's shameful. And the NEA gives grants in every congressional district in the United States. I started at Trinity Rep in Providence, Rhode Island, which started in a church basement with a $5,000 NEA grant. And they took that good housekeeping seal of approval around to, businesses and high net worth individuals and low net worth individuals, and cobbled together enough to make a amazing regional theater that is, one of the cornerstones of Providence, Rhode Island, and the state of Rhode Island.
So, Kara, Tim, and Kenny, is there like some petition? Like, how do we make the world know that Americans want art? Like, are we united, or are we all just disparate?
Well, I'll just go. I mean, one of the problems with the nonprofit world is that We're all out there competing for the same bucks. And I am happy that there are people out there who support the arts. I do believe my point of view is that there's got to be a baseline from the federal government, that the federal government has got to acknowledge the importance of arts in this country. I mean, look what happens when a foreign dignitary comes to this country. The first thing that happens, out come the artists, out come the singers, the dancers, the musicians. There's a big show because the arts are the emissaries of our culture. And if we can't recognize that, then we're in deep shit. And the only thing I can say about how to do it is to just talk about it. Call your senators, call your Congress people, go to your school board and demand that, that arts be back on the curriculum in schools. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, it's hard in this atmosphere when Los Angeles is burning down and, the SNAP is going, the school lunches are going. I mean, there's a lot of like just sort of existential things, but I would argue that without arts, will not exist as the human beings. The beauty of humanity will not exist. So we gotta save it.
Yeah, I think you got to imagine big, but actually act small.
Oh.
It's like
think globally, act locally.
It's like start at your mailbox. Talk to your friend, your neighbor next door at your mailbox, and say, hey, we got to do something about this. Then go to the city council, talk. Make beauty or make truth where you are, because if not, it's like the paralysis of analysis. It would be too much. The problem will be too big. And I think if we just take it down, make it smaller, and defend the rights of where you are in your regions, like resist from where you are. And we just got to be not afraid to speak up, not afraid to fight for what's right.
It's funny that you say that, because I came up with a slogan a few years ago that I thought was very clever, that it hasn't quite caught on as much as I hope, but I thought there should be a 28th Amendment to the Constitution, and it should be the right to bear arts. So that's my mantra. We have Tim, a right.
I love that. And it's also like, you care about your kids, you care about family. Let's start there. You would not allow your kids in an elementary school that did not believe in creativity, did not give your kids room to draw and to create and to tell stories and to fight or to, my grandkid is dyslexic. And I'm like, I love institutions that say, let's meet the kids where they are.
Yes.
Let's teach them where they are. Everybody, we process things differently. And just like in the arts, we appreciate different stories. So let's start in our schools, let's start in our churches, start in our neighborhoods, start in our mailboxes, but we got to do something. The answer is not to sit back and say, oh, we're helpless, we can't do anything. I promise you, if enough of us think small and act and what we could do, you know what I mean? I believe that it would change things. I believe that, and not in a corny way, but that love will win. But it's too often we feel like, oh, it's too big. We can't believe it's happening. And we end up holding our breath and not doing anything. Every little thing adds up to the big thing.
It's like that old thing.
I'd urge everyone who is listening to call their congressperson or to email. There are form letters you can Google. If you Google my story, I link to a form letter.
You
can
do?
send to your congressperson. Yeah. There's a next step section in my story. If you Google my name and NEA, there's a next steps, what you can do section. And, there are things like post on Facebook. If you can't afford to give a donation yourself, just post, encourage people to go to the theater, encourage people to maybe that can afford to give $5 to give $5, because we're talking about, people think of theater as Kenny and Tim both said, as some sort of, and Seth, you implied, like some sort of big gay romp on Broadway, right? But a lot of it is programs for Indigenous children, and that sort of thing that we don't think about, but that's what it is. That's what the NEA is supporting throughout the nation. And that is what can help, your $5 can help that. It can't help run Death Becomes Her on Broadway, right? It can help run a tiny program that's all of $30,000 to run, period, you know? And so if you can't donate, you can write to your congressperson, you can call. And I've done congressional outreach, and I know Tim is going there next week, and I think he can tell you that your representatives do care about how many people are calling them.
That's great. I love it. So it's in your article, Kara. So
Yeah.
I guess, before we go to this Moisés interview, just so you know, Tim, you were awesome in Wings, to make sure. And the real reason we invited you is because, hold on, where do I have it? We remember your sister, Daly and Cagney Lacey, and it's important that we mainly focus on her. Okay, so let me ask you something. My favorite questions. Tim and Kenny, biggest mishaps. Can you tell me a good story, either a theatrical mishap or a TV mishap that happened either to you or you witnessed?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot. I'll say that, I did well, speaking of Tyne Daly, Tyne and I did a play a few years ago together, that, written by Teresa Rebeck. And we were at the Cherry Lane Theater, where Tyne made her New York debut 50 years earlier. And in 19 performances, this is a 99-seat house. It's a beautiful little theater. 19 performances, 21 cell phones went off.
I was there when a cell phone went off, actually.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable. But the one that got me the most was, I was doing this play last year with Jane Atkinson called Still, and a phone went off, and whoever was in the audience answered it, and it was on speakerphone, and the person who called said, "Where are you?" And I looked out at the audience and said, "I'm right up here doing a play." That was a minor mishap.
It's a different world. Kenny, you did the Wiz Live. I mean, those live musicals, were you having a panic attack? I was. Hairspray Live?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Wiz Live, Hairspray Live. I remember in the Wiz Live, the night before we went, was it the night before we went live? Yeah, the night before we went live. And an actress was singing the first song, and she just went up. She's like, just did not remember the lyrics. And I'm like, oh my God. But the music kept playing. And thank God it was the night before. And it helped us when we got live, because it's like, hey guys, if you ever just lose your way, just find two eyeballs and take a deep breath. Just don't panic. And it's hard to do in a live situation.
How about find the cue cards? In my day, we had cue cards.
We didn't have cue cards.
Okay, forget it. I'm not being directed by you ever again. Oh, wait, you never directed me. Okay, so that gave me a panic attack. Tim, everyone mute your damn cell phones. Kara, we're going to Google your damn article. So everyone, I really think these petitions will help. Okay, so I guess in conclusion, I really do appreciate everybody being here. What I love is that Kenny and Tim, you guys are so successful. It's like, you don't need to help small regional theaters. Like, you're taking time out of your life because you believe in the arts. I think it's really moving.
It's because I believe in the possibility of what the country used to be about. And you grew up poor in Tallahassee, Florida. Even if it wasn't true, there was always a thing like, I believe in the dream of what's possible. If you work hard, things can happen. And now we get into the place where, like, that's no longer, you feel like it's no longer true. So I think it's important to talk to young folks to say, you know what, however we got here, however we stumble on what was right in this country, we can make it be the country we want. And it's all left up to the people. So I believe in talking to young folks, saying, no, let's revolt. This country belongs to all of us, it's, before George Floyd's death, we were moving forward in a way that was inclusive of more people. And all of a sudden, that's not good any longer. And so this is what resistance looked like. And I think people are desperate. But that encourages me because, hey, they're fighting the NEA. They know there's power there. They know there's beauty there. They know there's creativity there. But this is did we expect people to give up this, in an easy way? So it's important for me to do this because you know what? None of us are going to get out of here alive. So it's what we do while we're here to sustain a beautiful place for people to live in the future.
So,
Amen. And
Daly, I was going to say you could be sitting by a fireplace in Vermont. Why are you doing this? Why are you wasting your time doing this?
because the arts saved my life, and because I have not, since I started, participating in various forms of arts, I haven't been bored my entire life.
Uh-huh.
And I do, I make pottery, I build furniture, I play the guitar, I grow a garden. There's so many other things about my life. I think of it like a house. Like if you have a house, it can be beautiful, but if you only put beds in it, it's going to be really impossible to deal with. But if you put pictures and chairs and desks and stuff, then you're going to have a rich environment for you to live in. And I just want to say, I think that creativity and imagination are muscles. And like other muscles, if you don't exercise them, they atrophy. And the arts are the gym for your imagination and for creativity. So we got to do this stuff to stay fit because, we have been the most creative culture, maybe in humanity. And the reason for that is that we have been, as Kenny was saying, we have been receptive to all these different ideas and all these different notions that clash up against each other and have this wonderful creative friction. And there's never been anything like it. And if we try to homogenize ourselves and just think in one way or act in one way, then we're not going to have that great big idea that comes out that, changes our lives, whether it's in the arts or something else. But I think that telling each other stories, making beauty, making things that make us think, that either confirm or challenge our beliefs, that is what we need to be doing. So that's why I'm here.
So inspiring. And Kara, you're obviously in a silo, but you'll get out eventually. I don't know what your background is, but it's creeping me out, girl. So in conclusion, are you going to keep...
As you know, I'm in Atlanta, so it's, a very, very hotel. I'm going to the Alliance, Kenny. I flew out here for the Alliance, so there you go.
Are you seeing the Adam Gettle show?
Yes.
So exciting.
Adam Gettle is a neighbor of mine.
Miles show.
It's 5 minutes from me here in Vermont, yeah.
Well, he's a neighbor of mine, just Jewish-wise. We're all descended from the same person. Okay, so Kara, so what we're going to do is we're all going to Google your article. You're going to continue this sort of NEA regional obsession articles, right? You're going to give us more?
Yep.
You're doing such great work. Okay.
Thank you for that. We thank you for your work, Kara. Thank you.
Thank you all for your work. And thank you for raising the profile of this.
Well, my God, it's a great article.
We need to.
So I'm going to cut. I did an interview with Moisés. He was going to Spain to go do his new play Here There Are Blueberries, which was an NEA grant. So I'm going to cut that interview. I'm going to peace out on Tim and on Kenny and on Kara. And audience, thank you so much for being here. And Kenny, thank you so much for offering me a role in your new show. I really do appreciate it.
He said, just come to rehearsal tomorrow.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to get rid of you clowns. Bye, Carol. I'll talk to you later. Bye, Timmy. I'll talk to you later. I'm going to say goodbye to myself, and then hello. This is not live. I'm Moisés. I'm talking to my audience. This is not live. I'm welcoming. Now, I want to say, is it Moisés or Moisés?
B
or B. So it's Moisés Kaufman. Now, why aren't there two F's in your last name like a normal person?
There are a million ways of spelling Kaufman. 2 N's, 2 F's, 2 N's, and 2 F's. My father decided to go with the simpler one, Kaufman.
Where did you grow up?
Actually, the original name was Koifman, Kaufman, but they changed it to sound more German and less Jewish. I grew up in Venezuela.
Venezuela. So it wasn't one of those Ellis Island last name changes like so many of us have.
No, they did it in Romania before they came over. And the problem was that America was not accepting any more Jewish immigrants at that moment. So my father went to Venezuela because he had a cousin in Venezuela.
What year was that? Do you know?
Yes, 48, 47, 48.
Wow. So the whole cutting off immigrants was affecting. That's so interesting. So you grew up in Venezuela. Okay, we are here to talk about the NEA, or as they would say in Venezuela, NEA. Still got it. Thank you. I literally took Spanish in La Escuela Secundaria. All right, so Moisés, why has the NEA been important to you and your incredible work. By the way, if people don't know, I'm sure I'll get introduced this. You know that Moisés has like created these brilliant projects. Anyway, why is it important to you? Why has it been?
Well, we started our company, Tectonic Theater Project, in 1991. So the company's almost 35 years old. And, I think on our second or third year, the NEA started funding us. And it has been funding us, for 35 years. So basically, that means that all of our work has been partially funded by the NEA.
And what does that mean? So you like fill out a grant application? Like how does the process work?
Yeah, yes, you have to fill out a grant application. But originally, my husband and I started the company together, and we would sign, and Jeff, had experience grant writing, so he would write the grants. But the important thing about the NEA for a young theater company is not only that they give you some seed money and that you can start working, but also that it legitimizes you. So that means that other organizations, other not-for-profits, other foundations can donate money to you because the NEA is funding you.
And some people are saying right now, oh, what's the big deal? They're cutting $15,000. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how is the money? How did it first help you? Just the literalness of the money. But obviously, you're already saying it doesn't even matter what the money was because the gravitas of having the NEA behind you. But how did it help you, even having a small amount of money?
No, look, when people say a small amount of money, that is not a valid argument because for small companies, a small amount of money can be a great deal, can mean a great deal. And for us at Tectonic, those early grants, even if they were $10,000 or $15,000, that was the most amount of money we were getting from anyone. And as the company grew, the grants grew, and the amount of money that we were getting grew. So I think that yes, there may be, if you're ART or if you're arena stage, maybe the NEA grant is a small fraction of your total budget. But if for the smaller companies, the independent artists, the artists in other categories, in other fields, it's still incredibly relevant.
So it's both. It's the money actually does make a difference, and on top of that, having that name makes other people give money, so it's going to lead to more money. Okay, now what about those people that are like, the NEA was funding Piss Christ, that thing in the 90s everyone was obsessed with. How can you say to them, like, it doesn't matter, art is art? Like, what is your opinion when someone says, like, we're not going to fund obscenity?
Well, there are two things to be said about that. Number one, even back then, when they were saying stuff like that, the percentage of art that was being objected to compared to the effect that the NEA has had in America as a whole was, barely significant. Number two, you have to remember that the NEA has always been a lightning rod that conservatives use to attack us. So no matter what the NEA does, it'll always be a sense of, it always is a lightning rod in the culture wars. But I think the most important thing I would say is that the moment that a community or a government tries to dictate to artists what they are to do, art either entirely vanishes or becomes a mere form of craft. So, if you have a problem with free speech, then you should talk about free speech, but you should not attack the NEA for supporting all kinds of work.
As usual, very well spoken. Okay, so I want to talk about two projects. So, two of your projects. So the Laramie project, which you said was specifically helped by the NEA, was about the murder of Matthew Shepard, and one of your signatures, Tectonic signature, is to interview people and turn that into an actual show, and that's what the Laramie project was. So, what kind of effect do you think that show had on the audience as well as society?
It's true that some of Tectonic's work is based on interviews, but it's only part of it. When I wrote 33 Variations, it was an entirely fictional play.
You didn't interview Beethoven? Thank you. It's my comedy. Thank you.
I had a Ouija board, but it didn't work.
That's totally maybe no. Okay, go on.
And Blueberries was based on photographs, and so I think that the work is more than just interview based. But the Laramie project was that kind of miracle where we did this play because I really wanted to go to Laramie um, and see why it happened in that town, why this young boy was murdered in that town. Um, and more importantly, there at that point in 2000, in 1999, there were about a thousand anti-gay crimes that were committed in America, anti-LGBTQ crimes that were committed in America. And but yet this one resonated. This one was the one where we as a nation took notice. Perhaps it was because of the brutal nature of the crime. They tied Matthew Shepard to a fence and left him there to die. And in America, that was perceived as a crucifixion. And you cannot deal with that kind of imagery in this country without getting an incredible amount of attention. There were other reasons of why this crime got such incredible notoriety and so much attention. One was that Matthew, when they found Matthew at the fence, he survived for 3 more days. And so we all around the country had the opportunity to wish and pray that he would survive. So we got very involved in the story of Matthew Shepard because we were wishing that he would survive. And I think the other thing that must be said is that he got incredible amount of attention because he was white, because he was photogenic. He came from a middle class family. He was a university student. So in America's eyes, that murder means much more than, a young Latino trans kid who goes home with somebody and gets murdered in their home, right? Matthew was seen in America as a very worthy victim, while, members of more disenfranchised communities, whether it's Latino, African American, trans, you know, they are not as worthy in Americans' eyes. So Matthew Shepard was murdered. He died, and this became a lightning rod in American culture. And so what we were talking about in the theater company is, can we go to Laramie and talk to the people of the town and gather a document that would not only speak about what was happening in Laramie at that time, but what was happening in America as a whole. And that we would gather a document that was not only about how Americans felt about sexuality and gender, but how they felt about violence, how they felt about religion, how they felt about education, how they felt about kind of all of the pillars, the intellectual pillars and ideological pillars that hold up the American dream, or what we called at times the American dream. So that's what we did. We went to Laramie. We spent a year in Laramie going back and forth, talking to the people of the town. And from those interviews, we crafted the play. Now, what we didn't know is that the play over the last 25 years would become one of the most performed plays in America. It's still one of the most performed plays in America every year. And I think it's because it is an X-ray of all of the fault lines that are in our culture. Like, what are the things that are dividing us about gender, about sexual orientation, about all of these things? And in the words of the people of Laramie, you can hear the deep divisions that permeate every aspect of our society. And I think that's why the play has done what it did. 10 years after the first, the Laramie project, we decided to return to Laramie and talk to the people because we wanted to know how the town had changed. And at that moment, the NEA was incredibly helpful because what we decided to do, because so many people had already done Laramie, we created a system by which we contacted people who had already done the Laramie project. And we said, we've written a second play. And we decided to take one night and have every city around the country do a production of the Laramie project or a reading of the Laramie project on the same night. And it was an incredible undertaking. Like 115 theater companies around the country read the play that night. Judy Shepard came to New York, and we did a reading of the play in New York City. And then we did an internet connection with all of the cities so that they could hear and ask questions of Judy Shepard and the theater company. That was almost entirely funded by the NEA.
And what kind of effect do you think that had?
All of a sudden, the second play that we wrote became also, when you look at how many productions are of both plays, Laramie Project 10 years later immediately started being performed everywhere. And it was because of that event that Greg Reiner, who was our executive director at the time, organized. And Greg Reiner then went to run the theater department at the NEA.
But I guess when I think of a play like that, I could see it deepening the divide because people dig their heels in and say, no, like, these prejudices basically are correct. Like, I'm on the side of, straight people. Like, do you think it opened people's minds, or do you think it made these people that did this crime or thought that way, be considered complete idiots, and separated people more?
I think that's a great question. Look, we interviewed close to 200 people, and many of them were very, very, very conservative. And when we were writing the play, we did not want to make up an agitprop piece. We didn't want to make a piece that only spoke to the people who agree with us. We wanted to really kind of photograph a cross section of American thought. So if you're a conservative and you go see the Laramie Project, you will hear your POV expressed in the Laramie Project. And it will be done with respect, and with dignity. We didn't make fun of the people who thought different than us. We didn't mock them. We didn't insult them. So because of that, the play does work as a space where ideas can be exchanged um, in a very fruitful way. I believe that theater has the ability to serve as an incredible platform for contemporary dialogues. Um, and I think that when you show a play and you treat both sides with respect, then both sides are much more willing to come to the table for a conversation. I also think that at the end of the day, the murder of this young boy who, was tied to a fence, beat 19 times with the butt of a gun, no matter how conservative you are, there is a way in which, if you have any shred of humanity, there is a way in which your heart goes out to this person. And I think that Matthew Shepard's story kind of operates as somewhat of a cohesive glue for the people who come to see it.
Do you think, I
But
guess,
I have to say that if you ask audiences who see it, each person will have a different answer to your question.
but that's kind of the point of art, is that people see things differently. You view it as you view it. But do you think it's, I guess, I mean, I think the answer is obviously yes, but do you think it's added in a positive way to the conversation about the homophobia that this country faces? I mean, do you think it's opened people's minds and made them less prejudiced?
Look, all I can say is this. It has been done in every major regional theater. It has been done in universities. It has been done in high schools. And it's one thing to see the play, right? As you see a play, you have an experience of 2 hours. But there's all these people who have been in the play, who have performed the play. And as you know, a rehearsal period can take anywhere from 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 8 weeks. That means that the individuals in these communities get to have a very in-depth experience of the play because they have to live with this play for 4, 6, 8 weeks. And then they have to present the words of the people of Laramie to the people in their community. So we get letters all the times from people who have been in the play, who is like, a 13-year-old boy in Wisconsin and says, I was in this play, and not only did it affect my life profoundly, but every night at home, I would have dinner with my parents and we would talk about this. So I think that's one other thing that theater does that we don't talk a lot about, which is that for the people who actually perform in the play, they're having a very intimate relationship with the ideas and the subject matter of the play. So I want to believe that yes, that it has a positive impact, and that it has had an impact in kind of generating a space where conversations can be had.
That's something I never thought of, and it's really fascinating. And that's also something the NEA does. When you talk about what would $15,000 do, funding a tiny little theater company to allow these people to immerse themselves in the play, it is changing society. Wow, that's so beautiful, Moisés. I never thought about that. So the other show I want to talk about is the current one you're doing, which you're about to go to España. They're going to do it there, right?
Yes, they're doing it in Madrid, and it's the right now. So here there are Blueberries started at La Jolla Playhouse. Then we went to Washington Shakespeare Theater, and then we opened at New York Theater Workshop. And then after that, this past 11 months, we've been on a national tour. So we did the McCarter, then we did the Los Angeles, the Annis Wallenberg Center, and then we did Berkeley Rep. And then the second year we're going to have four more cities in the national tour. At the same time, we've released the licensing rights, but because the play is so technically complex, we wanted our production to be seen as much as possible. But in Madrid, there's this brilliant director who wanted to get the rights, and I saw his work, and I was smitten, and I thought I want to see what he will do with it. So I'm leaving tonight to Madrid for the opening of the play that will happen on Wednesday.
Is it translated into Spanish?
Spanish, yes.
Wow, that's exciting. So what's it called? Like I was gonna say Ilia blueberries, but no, that's French. Like esta, what's it called? Aquí.
He said that the word for blueberries in Spanish is arándanos. It's not a great word, so he called it Blaubeeren, which means blueberries in German. So
Um,
really beautiful title for the play. And then we're doing it. Then I'm directing it in London after that.
and it's called Ear. There are blueberries. Hello, cocking. So thank you. So this show is opening people's eyes about. Thank you. Opening people's eyes about Nazism. That people aren't quote unquote monsters. They're kind of regular people that can easily become monsters, and that's I mean,
Well,
is that's not what you think. That's
well,
my analysis.
the way that I think about it is,
Okay.
it's not that they become monsters. I think that, I think that when you speak of Nazis as monsters, what you're doing is you're kind of distancing yourself from, you're saying, well, they're monsters. Of course, they could do something like that because they're monsters, but I would never do something like that.
Right.
I think it's much more helpful for a conversation to think about them as regular human beings who did monstrous things.
Yeah.
Right? And but in making that distinction, you're not assigning a personal characteristic to people who can do one thing, and that, you know, then releases you for the moral responsibility of examining whether or not you could do something like that.
Because you're not mentally ill. That's the whole thing. Some people could say, "Oh, that was a psychotic person that stabbed someone to death." These are not mentally ill people. They're just regular human beings. And the show, your play shows how just a regular person can slowly morph into someone that does these monstrous things, which is obviously completely relevant. I mean, why don't you tell me why you think it's relevant to today? Because it's completely relevant to me.
Well, I think that the thing that was, look, my father was a Holocaust survivor, and I always thought, oh, maybe it would be good to write a play about the Holocaust. But it's the event, the historical event that has been most written about in all of literature. And I always thought that, what else is there to be said? But then um, new photos emerged, were discovered by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And there were photos of the concentration camp Auschwitz. And they were not photos of the victims, they were photos of the perpetrators. So this album of photographs, there were photographs that were taken by the associate to the head of the camp, by the assistant of the head of the camp. So this was a man who was very high up there. And he did this album to kind of record his experience in the camp. So the photos are of him with the secretaries having a day in the country. Are photos of them lighting Christmas trees. Are photos of them playing with their pets. Are photos of them playing with their children. Um, and so they record the daily lives of the officers who run Auschwitz. So if you don't know what's happening outside of the frame, you think, oh, well, this is a perfectly lovely time they're having. But if you know that outside of the frame, they're killing 1.1 million people, all of a sudden you see the importance of these photographs. So that's why I decided to write the play, because I thought these photographs are new. This is a new discourse. This is something. The other thing is that since the Holocaust, we have been really focused on the victims, on telling the stories of the victims, correctly so. But I think that now there is a movement to start focusing more on the perpetrators and why did they do what they did, with the belief that if you understand the psychology of the perpetrator, if you understand how a person can get to behave that way, then you can prevent others from undergoing that transformation. Um, so that's what the play talks about, and I think that I started writing it the first time that Trump was president because I was feeling like there was a great deal of looking in the other direction or joining in it. And then we finished it during Biden's administration, but now during the tour, the play is getting such different responses because Trump is president again, and we're seeing so much of the behavior that is, very fascistic, and so we can see that there are similarities in the way people are behaving now and then. people were behaving that.
And it's kind of about people kind of disassociating, having their lives and then disassociating from their other lives in a sense, or being able to have both lives.
Well, I think that it's a deep exploration about how you do that. How do you have a regular life and then go to work and do these things, right? Yes, disassociating is one of them. Compartmentalizing is another way in which they do it.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who didn't need to compartmentalize or to disassociate. They believed that they were doing the right thing. So
Right.
there's people who were running the camp because they thought that they were going to clean, Europe from something they thought was very damaging for Europe, which was, any minority, whether it was Jewish or homosexuals or
Or Roma, disabled.
exactly. So the play shows you that there's a panoply of ideas and ways in which a human being can get to the place where they do that, right? So as you said, some of it can be I compartmentalize. That's my job. That's not me. I disassociate. I'm going to enjoy my life at this moment. The world is at war. I'm going to do what I need to do to make my family survive. And there's other people who said, no, this is exactly what we need to be doing. We're doing God's work.
And that's about brainwash, misinformation, and being brainwashed. How can you respond to someone that says, not you made this up, but like, well, what do you didn't interview the people about, the guards of Auschwitz like you did with Laramie. Like, how do I know that any of this is even really true?
Because the photographs tell their story.
Yeah.
So there's something very, very, very factual about you're looking at the images, right? And we also, in the play, we also talk to the descendants of the Nazis, to the grandchildren and children and grandchildren. So we do get a bit of that, story from that side. But yeah. So
Why did you pick that particular photo that's everywhere with the accordion when they're all like laughing?
Because the title of the play here, there are blueberries, comes from a photograph in the album where you see all of the secretaries. And that's the other thing. People didn't know that there were secretaries in Auschwitz. They didn't know that women were there helping run the office. And they have gone, one of the things that this album showed that people didn't know is that there was a vacation resort inside the camp complex. So when the people who were running the camp got tired, or when they needed to give somebody a reward for a job well done, they would send them to this vacation resort that looks like a Swiss chalet that was in the camp. And so the secretaries probably had done something good, and the owner of the album takes them to this place called Solahut, which means hut by the Sola River. The Sola River was the river that went right by Auschwitz, to have a day of recreation. And while they're there, they find that there are blueberries there. And the photos that you're mentioning are photos of them eating these blueberries. And they're so delighted that they found blueberries and they're having this delicatessen, while a few miles from where they're sitting, people are starving to death.
Oh, wow. And I guess the overview of what we're saying is these really important social plays that are also incredibly entertaining, even though they're emotional, they're made possible because you began getting grants from the NEA all those decades ago.
Well, not only that, look, both of those plays were extremely costly to create. Right, in Laramie, we had to be flying back and forth and staying in Laramie and conducting interviews with the people of the town. In this play, we had to fly to Poland and go to the concentration camp and then fly to Berlin and interview people. We had to spend, a great deal of money with projectors so that we could have them in the rehearsal rooms. There's all of these things that people don't think about. Mm-hmm. People think that writing a play means an author going into a room for 20 years and coming out with a play. But what you're seeing now in America is that there's this kind of revolution where there's a lot of theater makers who are dealing with devising work. And devising is a way of creating work that is not about a playwright going into a room and making a play, but it's about a group of people coming into a room and creating work together. And I think that for the companies that work that way, that's a very expensive proposition. I was talking to the people of the team, to Rachel Chafkin, about how expensive it is to create work this way. And the NEA, from the beginning of this kind of revolution of devising, of new theater companies that are working this way, has always been incredibly eager to support us.
So, I mean, you're not a politician, you're not a lobbyist, but what can people watching right now, what can they do to try to keep these funds going? Do you have any advice?
Well, I think we have to keep being vocal in our defense of the NEA, and
Silence is not an option.
yes,
Thank
it's not an option. So I think that the more we have to really, the NEA is an endowment that has really fought for us and supported us for decades. It's our time to stand up for them.
So well said. All right. In conclusion, Moisés, have an amazing flight to España.
Thank you.
And I love all your work, and I can't wait to see your next one. And back to you, Seth. I'm going to cut to myself. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording. This is stupid. Back to you, Seth. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. Don't you love him? So erudite, as we say in the fancy words business. Oh, hey, don't forget a Charity Buzz. It's almost out of time. So if you go to Charity Buzz, look up United Voices for Change, or just Broadway. You can co-host with me on Sirius XM Radio. You can go to see Maybe Happy Ending, Tony Award-winning musical, and you can hang out with Tony Award winner Darren Criss. You can go see, oh my God, The Amazing Old Friends, and hang out with Lea Salonga. Didn't she look beautiful last night? You could also go see Tony Award winners Kelly O'Hara and Sutton Foster in concert and hang out with them. Charity Buzz, it's true. Search United Voices for Change. And please look up Kara Joy David's article and write that letter. And we're going to be back. Dave, we're going to be back next week. I can't remember next week, but I know that we have a Pride show coming up. We have stuff coming up on Stars in the House. Thanks everybody for watching. David, you can play the ending credits. Bye.